You guys, I am so proud of myself. Look at my progress on my cover. I got the border finished and then I went in with the blue. I honestly didn't think I was going to do anything beyond the border, but I got another surge of motivation and I ordered yellow and purple bedazzle rhinestones on Amazon. So that gave me another surge of motivation to keep going on the blue. So I did this. The other colors came yesterday, so I think I'm going to go on the slipper next, but I do think eventually I'm going to get the whole cover done. So that will be part of this progress as well. And we're making progress on the book. We are starting this video on chapter 8. I'm actually going to skip the first part of chapter 8, what happens, because it's extremely vulnerable. And I did something extremely vulnerable yesterday. So I have a vulnerability hangover and I just don't have the capacity to talk about what happened at the beginning of chapter 8. And on that note about vulnerability, I'm a huge proponent of being vulnerable because vulnerability works the opposite way that we think it does. Because I used to think I had to be all perfect and polished or whatever, but when you present yourself like that, people don't relate to you because we're human beings and we have all these spectrums of emotions and experiences. And nobody is perfect. We all go through shitty things. We all do things that we regret. Nobody is perfect. And nobody feels good all of the time, because that's another thing that pisses me off. People are afraid to admit that they're sad or going through something hard or whatever because they're afraid of what other people think. But who cares? We all go through shitty things. So in general, I'm a huge proponent of being vulnerable because it is so relatable and it helps us connect to each other. But on that note, it is scary no matter how much you do it, and you have to take care of yourself in those moments because I've heard of other people talking about having vulnerability hangovers. So I am a huge proponent of being vulnerable, but you also have to take care of yourself. So that is what I'm doing, and I'm skipping over the beginning of chapter 8, but I do want to talk about what happens at the end, because in the last video, we left off at the rooftop party, and I take accountability for my part in what happened because number one, I never even should have gone. And number two, I should have been questioning things a lot more than I really was. And so that ended up in a situation that I didn't want to be in. And then in reflecting about it afterwards, because initially I was blaming myself, but then I was like, wait a minute. He was dancing with me. He was holding my hand. Like he was leading me on. So how was I supposed to know? And then it reminded me about, because he would always cheat on me when we were together. And I just kind of started thinking about that because it's like, oh, now I'm the other person. And then it made me wonder, did the other girls, when he was cheating on me, did they know? And if they did know, why didn't they tell me? And so I started thinking about it and I was like, I would have wanted to know because I think, and I'm not putting the accountability on the other girls, but I think it would have hit a lot harder if they would have reached out to me about it. And there were probably cases that I didn't even know about. So it's like, I would want to know. And just to be clear, this is obviously how I felt as I was writing the book or as this experience was unfolding, because I did not write the book in hindsight. But to this day, I would have done the exact same thing, which is so Julia was the girl that Mark had left me for. And he was still with her when he tried to hook up with me after the rooftop party. So I didn't have a direct way to contact her, but I knew one of her friends. So I reached out to her friend. I think I call her Kimberly in the book. And I told her everything that happened. So I was just like, hey, like, sorry to dump this on you, but I don't know any other way to get a hold of Julia. I thought that, I just thought she'd like to know this. And so it ended up being this whole thing because everyone was pissed off at me about it, that he cheated, or almost, basically he still cheated on her because we were making out and doing a bunch of other stuff. So, but everyone got pissed at me, like Kimberly, obviously Julia, Mark, one of Mark's friends, everyone was pissed at me and was like, you should have kept your mouth shut, blah, 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 blah. But to this day, I stand firm in what I did, because if it were me, I would want to know. I truly thought I was abiding by girl code. And also, to be clear, it was extremely embarrassing for me to reach out to Kimberly to tell her that, because I made a mistake too. So it was embarrassing for me, but I was just like, hey, thought she might like to know. And I don't know. I still agree with what I did, but I received a lot of backlash for it from many people. And I get that Mark and Julia would be pissed about it, but just like Kimberly and everybody else being mad about it, it's like, why do people not like the truth speaker? You know what I mean? Because I was simply speaking the truth. So that's the other thing that happened, and my mic cord is in the way. That's the other thing that happened at the end of chapter 8 that I do feel comfortable talking about. Also, here's the other thing about, and I'm losing my camera because I was going to my notes, but they did break up for a little bit and then they got back together, but it's like, that's on them, because I felt so good in myself that I spoke the truth. So I don't know why I thought that was important. But anyway, so that brings us to chapter 9. Which is February 2018. So this is a full year after my dad had passed away. So obviously there was a lot of grief, a lot of drama, a lot of trauma, a lot of things. And I think it was the energy of the new year turning over and me just really starting to think about life, especially because my dad was only 63. And that was a reminder to me that life is too short to not do what you want to do. So for the first, I think it was the first time of my life, I just paused because I almost said one of the first times, but I think it was the very first time in my life that I had actually started considering, what do I want in my life? Because up until that point, I had been blindly following the rules of society. Like, I went to college, I got a corporate job, I, had the car and the material things and whatever, and I was checking off all of the boxes of the things that you should be doing in life, but I didn't really feel happy and fulfilled in my life. So I was like, what do I want? And when I really honestly answered that question, I started thinking about how for years I had been telling myself, one day I want to move to Hawaii. One day I want to be a writer and write a book. But it was always just this thought. Like, I was never really serious about taking action. And the whole Hawaii trajectory, I'll go into that into more detail right here because I didn't go into it in the book. But my obsession with Hawaii, it started when I was a little girl. I was like 6 years old and I had a Hawaii Barbie. She had hair down to her butt, which I thought was so fascinating. So that began my fascination with Hawaii. And it was always kind of there. And then I think it was 2007, one of my friends moved there. And here's the interesting thing. So when she moved, she was like, hey, you should come visit me sometime. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll come visit you. Not really being serious about it. It was just kind of like, like when you ask someone how they're doing and it's just more of a greeting than an actual question. That was my response to her, like, oh yeah, I'll come visit you. It was just more like an exchange and a conversation more than a genuine sincerity about me really coming. But what happened was, I'll try to make this short, it was like the end of 2007, her stepdad had a heart attack and passed away. So she came back from Hawaii and I saw her and she was glowing. Like, I mean, obviously she had a tan, but she was just like so happy and just so vibrant. Like, her aura was glowing. And keep in mind, this is 2007, so this is before smartphones. So now she would just pull out her phone and show me pictures, or I would probably already see her life on Instagram. But in 2007, I think we did have picture phones, but like, it was so grainy, it wasn't even worth it. So my point about the phones is, she wasn't showing me any physical pictures or anything on her phone. There was no Instagram or nothing. She was telling me about how amazing Hawaii was, and I could feel the energy just radiating off of her. And I was like, oh my God, I need to go to Hawaii. And she was like, you need to come. And so I booked my flight the very next day. So the first time I went to Hawaii, it was like in January or February of 2008. And my point about this is I don't believe in coincidences, because it was the whole timing of her dad passing away and because it wasn't even like a situation where I would normally be hanging out with her, but because she was back, because her stepdad had passed away, like it was just like the perfect timing of events, and everything came together, which led to my first trip to Hawaii in early 2008. And from the second I landed, Hawaii stole my heart, because like the energy here is so amazing, and I just couldn't help but feel it from the second I landed. And so she lived there for like 5 years. So every single year I would visit, and every single year I got more attached to Hawaii. And the best way that I can think to describe it is, when you miss a person and you can feel it in your heart, like I would come back to Chicago, and like months later, I would have like this longing in my heart because I missed Hawaii so much. So there was like part of me that just felt like I belonged there. So it was always ingrained in my brain. And so I just always had it in my mind, but it was always like, one day I'll move there. And then I think she moved away in like 2013. So in my mind, I was like, well, I missed my opportunity because now I don't know anybody there. And I always had all of these excuses about why it wasn't even possible for me. But so fast forward to February 2018, I'm having really deep thoughts about life and what would make me happy. And I was like, I would like to move to Hawaii and be a writer. And I can't remember if I've talked about it on this series before, but one of the most intense things you can do in your entire life is make a decision. Meaning, like, I think the origin of the word decision is like, I think it's Greek, don't quote me. I keep hitting my microphone. I think it's Greek, but it means like, I think it's Latin actually, obviously, because a lot of words are Latin based, but it means to like cut off, meaning when you make a decision, there's no other alternative. It's not like, well, if this doesn't work out, then I'll do that. Or how I had been talking to myself, well, maybe I'll do this, or one day I'll do that. But I had decided, no, I want to move to Hawaii and be a writer. But the problem is, after I made the decision, I was just kind of ruminating in the decision. I'm like, okay, yeah, I really want to do this, but I have no idea how, and I'm frozen in fear. So I decided, I was like, I need some motivation to light some fire under my butt. So I Googled motivational seminars in Chicago, thinking like it's a big city and there's like a lot of go-getters. Like I thought there would be a lot of opportunities for this. There were not, but I did find one, and it was called Fear Not. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. And I'm sorry, I keep looking at my book notes to make sure I don't go out of order. And I'm glad I did, because I found the motivational seminar, which gave me an initial burst of motivation between the time I signed up and to the time it actually happened. I also decided, because I was so scared about this decision to move to Hawaii and be a writer, I was like, I'm just going to act as if, which I have never been this bold in my entire life, but I emailed a realtor on Oahu. I was just Googling people, and there used to be a show called Hawaii Life. I don't know if it still exists, but through Googling Oahu realtors, like the realtors from that show came up first. So I just emailed one of the realtors that was on that show. I call her Agnes in the book. That is not her real name. And I emailed her, and I confidently, this is in February 2018, I confidently typed out, I was like, I'm moving to Hawaii later this year. this is my budget, which the budget I gave her was a terrifying amount over my actual budget, because I was like, if I'm just gonna act as if and pretend, like I'm gonna go all out. And I was like, this is my budget, can you help me? And so she emailed me back, she's like, hey, would you like to talk sometime? So I even had a conversation with her where I was like, yep, I'm moving later this year, this is my budget. Like, I felt like a total imposter on the inside, but on the outside, I'm like, yep, this is happening. And she set me up, you know how realtors set you up on their thing so that you get automatic emails with things that fit your criteria. So I did that before the motivational seminar. And then the day of the seminar comes, and I was so excited because I was like, okay, this is where I'm gonna get the burst of motivation. But there were red flags from the very beginning. So first of all, it was in this neighborhood. It's called River West, which I don't know if anyone's familiar with Chicago. Basically, that means it's north of the West Loop, like several neighborhoods north of the West Loop. And it's not really a popular neighborhood. So I didn't know much about it. So I didn't want to drive because parking in Chicago, it's either non-existent and or cost a fortune. So because I didn't know about the neighborhood, I was like, it might be non-existent parking and I don't want to drive around for 40 minutes. So I took an Uber, and the neighborhood, like, it wasn't very well lit, like it looked kind of sketchy, and the Uber driver was dropping me off in front of the address, and he was like, is this it? And I didn't know. I was like, yeah, it's fine. And so I walk up to the building, and it was a residential building. So I had to sign in with a door person, and I thought I was in the wrong place because I'm like, am I going to somebody's home? What is going on? Because none of this was described in the event description. And so I was like, I told the door person, like, yeah, I'm here for a motivational seminar. She's like, oh yeah, sign right in, it's on. And she gave me the information, because it ended up being on like the penthouse level was the community area. So I get off the elevator, and there was this kitchen area and then this big living room area with a TV and fireplace and stuff like that. But I walk in, and this is like the time that the event is to start. And there's only like a handful of people there. And two of the people, there's like this elderly couple in the living room. And when I say elderly, they're like in their 80s. And the guy, I think he's sleeping, but he kind of looks like he may not even be alive. But I could see that he's breathing and drooling. So I was like, okay, I think he's okay. But it was like so confusing because I'm like, how is this the motivational seminar? And then this woman who seems to be part of the event, she makes a beeline towards me. Keep in mind, this is winter in Chicago. So I'm wearing a like 800 fill goose down North Face coat down to my ankles, like hat, gloves, like I am bundled up. And this room, it's heated, it has a fireplace. So I'm ready to take my coat off and just like settle in, right? But she makes a beeline to me, and here, I'm actually gonna read it because it was so intimidating. And she comes up to me and she's like, hi, what's your name? And I was like, hi, I'm Angie. And she was like, hi, Angie, I'm Sheila. What brings you to the event? And I'm like, what? Why is she interrogating me before I had a chance to take off my coat? So I say, I'm making some changes in my life and need some motivation to implement them. Great. What kind of changes? Why is she putting me on the spot right now? I think I want to start a writing project, but I don't know if I have the courage to do it. I also want to move to Hawaii, but I'm way too embarrassed to admit that to you right now. Awesome. How did you hear about the event? Why are we doing this? Shouldn't this be part of the group introductions? I don't know. Google? There's an awkward pause. It's roasting in here with a fireplace blazing, and this conversation feels too forced. I am socially and physically uncomfortable that I can't stand it. Before the sweat starts soaking through my clothes, I need to take off my 850 fill goose down ankle length coat. And then Sheila finally takes my coat. But anyway, there's only a few other people in this motivational seminar, which wouldn't be a big deal, but it turns out two of the people are her mom and her friend. The elderly couple are her grandparents. So there were really only a few real attendees. But the worst part was Sheila wasn't a speaker. She was hosting the event, But the speaker was some guy named Shane. I think I also changed his name. But keep in mind, this seminar, it was called Fear Not. The entire time, Shane talks about the dangers of Monsanto and how you should only eat organic foods. And he told us about how, because this was in the city of Chicago, and like on the weekends, he would drive 2 hours to the suburbs to get free range eggs, filtered water, like all this uncontaminated stuff. And like he had all these protective measures in his house not to get any like Wi-Fi frequency or any frequencies in his body. And it was like obsessive compulsive. Oh, so it was weird, but also it was like, wait, how is this motivational? Well, at the end, he finally tells us that the reason it ties into not being fearful is because you won't be so anxious and fearful if you don't have all this poisonous shit in your body. And it was like 2 hours, but it was like the most awkward and painful 2 hours of my entire life. But this is the good thing that came out of it, and it actually ended up being one of the best things that happened to me in my life. So one of the other real attendees that was there, she told us about the seminar that she was going to. So keep in mind, this is February 2018. In May 2018, she was going to a real motivational seminar in Denver that featured Gary Vee and Tony Robbins. And I was like, wait, what is this event? And so she gave me the information. So the next morning, it felt like I had a hangover because I was like, what the hell was that event all about? But I was so pumped about this other event in Denver that in the hangover of the organic food rant, I went to this website to buy my ticket. And here's the thing about the seminar. There were 3 tiers of tickets. There was the general admission, and I think that cost like $30 or $40. There was an option for lunch with Gary Vee. So that included floor seating, and then you would have a special lunch where Gary Vee would be speaking, and that was $500 per ticket. And then the third tier was first or second row seating, the lunch with Gary Vee option, and they called it a meet and greet with Tony Robbins, which when I get to that event, I'll explain more about what that actually meant. But it was a meet and greet with Tony Robbins. So I had very low self-worth at that time. So I was like, first of all, the top tier was out of the question. I was like, I don't deserve to meet Tony. I don't even deserve to spend that much money on myself. Oh, because it was $2,000. That's where I was blanking because I was trying to remember how much it cost. And then the lunch with Gary Vee was $500, and I already mentioned that. So I was having this internal struggle because playing small, low self-worth me just wanted to buy the general admission seat. But there was a part inside of me, I was like, I want to move to Hawaii. I want to be a writer, and I knew that required me stepping up to my next level. So even though it made me nauseous, I clicked on the lunch with Gary Vee option and bought the $500 ticket. And I think that takes us to the end of the chapter. And I think this chapter is funny with the lame motivational seminar because there's so many more details that I left out here. But let me see. Yeah. Oh, and these were my critical inner voice as I was thinking about which tier of tickets that I wanted to buy. My critical inner voice was like, I don't deserve to meet Tony Robbins. I don't even deserve to be at that event. I'm not worthy of spending that much money on myself. And then at the end, I said, despite the barrage of my critical inner voice, I click on the lunch with Gary Vee option, which is terrifying and not something I feel deserving of. But I am determined to make changes in my life. From now on, I'm playing at a higher level. And the reason I read that, because that statement, because I had decided at the moment that I bought that ticket, from now on, I am playing at a higher level, which is also a decision. And that became extremely important, and I'll point that out as the story unfolds. So I'm still reading my notes. Okay, so I decided I wanted to move to Hawaii, but there are some obstacles. First of all, I had a job that was based out of Chicago. However, I worked from home most of the time. So I had an idea. Well, I had two ideas. I was like, one, I'm going to ask my manager if I can work remote from Hawaii. Another thing about my job, I worked for a global company and I had a global role, meaning I talked to people in Asia, I talked to people in Europe, I talked to people all over the United States. So there were so many of my colleagues that I had never even met because they were all over the globe too. So because keep in mind, this is 2018. So this was before like true remote work was the trendy thing to do. So even though in my mind, I was like, this is totally feasible. I could still keep my job and live in Hawaii. It was still a totally outlandish and crazy ask at that time. So I was like, how can I pull this off? And I knew going to the Gary Vee and Tony Robbins motivational seminar was going to be a huge part of it because I was like, I need to be delirious with motivation before I can even ask my manager. So I wasn't even planning on asking him until I got back from the event in May. But I also was like, I need to think about the possibilities because number one, I was planning on asking him, but I wasn't attached to him saying yes. I was, because everyone has free will and I respect his decision if he would have said no. So I was open to the possibility he may say no. So I started thinking about like, are there other remote jobs? Like what else could I do to be able to have a job and work in Hawaii? But I was hell-bent on asking him first. So I was like, how can I set myself up instead of just walking in there and asking this question out of nowhere? I felt like I need to set myself up a little bit. So I had an idea. I worked from home most of the time anyway, but I was still physically in Chicago. So one of my good friends, Beth, her and her husband own a condo in Destin, Florida that they rent out when they're not staying there. So I was like, actually, I think she offered me because I had the idea, like I just need to go somewhere else than Chicago for a month and work remote from somewhere else to prove to my manager that I can handle it. And I was telling her this idea and she was like, hey, if you want to, rent our condo, you can. And they gave me a really good deal. So I went to Destin, Florida for a month to work remote. And the funny thing is, I didn't even tell my manager because I worked from home most of the time anyway. And so, or I might have told him like in the middle of me being there, like, oh, by the way, I'm in Destin and I'll be here for 2 more weeks, just to kind of prove like this is how seamless it is when I'm in a different location. But I didn't tell anybody else and nobody else noticed that I wasn't even in Chicago. So that whole Destin thing was, I'm very proud of myself because it was a very good idea. So it helped set me up to ask him if I could work remote. But here's another thing that happened because I think it was in April. Yeah, because it was the month before the May seminar. So in April, it's still really cold and windy in Chicago, but I was in Florida. It was warm and sunny. So I think that just kind of opened me up emotionally, like being in nature, like it opened up my intuition. So when I was in Florida, one morning I woke up with an intuition hit and it was like, upgrade your ticket to the Tony Robbins option. And at that time, I knew I had strong intuition, but I ignored it a lot. But it was such a strong hit. I was like, I think I should follow this. So I looked at my confirmation email and I emailed them and I was like, hey, how can I upgrade my ticket? And they replied back. They were like, here's the phone number you can call to upgrade your ticket. And I read the email. And it was so scary that I deleted the email. I was like, you know what, intuition, like I'm good. I'm just gonna do the lunch with Gary Vee. And like maybe a week, maybe not even that long, a few days later, I wake up again and my intuition was punching me in the face, like upgrade your ticket. Like this hit was so strong, I could not ignore it. So despite being terrified, I called the number and here I wanna see, here, I'll just read this excerpt. This is the second time I got the intuition hit. I wake up in Destin with an intuition hit. Upgrade your seminar ticket to the meet and greet with Tony Robbins. Oh no, this is the first one. I email customer support and ask for assistance in upgrading my ticket. They respond the same day with instructions to call a phone number. And then my critical inner voice, I don't deserve to meet Tony. The critical inner voice is awake. I delete the email. About a week later, my intuition hits me over the head. Upgrade your seminar ticket to the meet and greet with Tony Robbins. I am now my intuition's bitch. I retrieve the email from trash and call the number. What am I doing? I don't even belong at this seminar. I wonder if the lady on the other end can tell what a fraud I am and how undeserving I am to be in the VIP tier. I'm terrified at the thought of spending this much money on myself and being in the VIP section, but I am ready to up level. I am ready to make some changes in my life. I am ready to move to Hawaii and be a writer, no matter how terrifying. So this is the power of the decision, because I had decided that I was ready to up level. So between my intuition barraging me and that, just I was laser focused on up leveling. So it almost seemed impossible not to upgrade my ticket. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, that's where I have like notes on my computer, a Post-it note. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it there, because in the next video, I'm gonna talk about the motivational seminar, because that was such a wild experience and it completely changed the trajectory of everything else I'm gonna talk about. So, and hopefully I'll have some yellow and purple bedazzle by then. So I will see you next time with more bedazzle, and we'll talk about the Gary Vee and Tony Robbins motivational seminar in Denver.